You're listening to the Birth Matters Podcast, episode 108.
I remember when I left our last class, I felt like I had the confidence to really go into this experience, knowing that I was fully prepared. As an actor, you want to know your lines backwards and forwards. You want to know your intentions. You want to know that piece that you're doing so well that when you go in, you can let all of the preparation go and just be in the moment and go on the ride. And for me, that's what I was able to do with you.
Hey there, and welcome to the Birth Matters Show. I'm your host, Lisa Graves Taylor, founder of Birth Matters NYC and director of East River Doula Collective. I'm a childbirth educator, birth doula, and lactation counselor, and have been passionately supporting growing families since 2009. This show is here to lessen your overwhelm on the journey into parenthood by equipping and encouraging you with current, best evidence info and soulful interviews with parents and birth pros. Please keep in mind, the information on this show is not intended as medical advice or to diagnose or treat any medical conditions. Are you following us on Instagram yet? We have lots of educational content there, so connect with us over at Birth Matters NYC. Well, hello again, treasured Birth Matters podcast listeners. I am so happy to be back with you. We've been on hiatus for too long, and I'm really excited to share lots of birth stories that we've recorded over the last few months. At the time I'm recording this, we have 16 stories already recorded, just waiting to be polished up and shared with you, and more in the works. So lots of good stuff ahead. I've started to experiment a little bit with AI for podcast efficiencies, so I have what I think will be an entertaining treat for you today. This was my first time to ask AI to write a summary of today's story in the style of a movie trailer, and I thought it was both hilarious and also very fitting for today's story, given it's shared by a really entertaining, gregarious actor, as you heard in the teaser. So here we go, a little bit about today's story.
In a bustling city teeming with ambition and dreams, Alexis, an actress, dreamer, and now mother, takes us on her journey into motherhood. From the grand stages of New York City to the intimate confines of a 5-story Harlem walk-up, Alexis prepares for the role of a lifetime. As she immerses herself in prenatal yoga, pores over all the books, and engages in birth classes, her transition is magnified by music, art, and deep-rooted determination. Facing an accelerated birth amid apprehensive paramedics, the ties of sisterhood bring comfort as her doula holds the fort. In the midst of chaos, Alexis gives birth at home, keeping her resilience flowing like a quiet undercurrent. And a new star, baby Anita, is born. A tale of dreams, drama, and the divine journey into motherhood. This is the mesmerizing story of Alexis Field giving birth to baby Anita.
So I hope you enjoyed that. Before we jump into today's story, I just wanted to share a couple of quick updates. East River Doula Collective continues to offer our free virtual Meet the Doulas events every few weeks, and we'd love for you to join us if you're seeking doula support or if you'd just like to learn more about doula support. Also, I continue to offer my virtual 1-hour evidence-based birth Savvy Birth 101 workshop, which is a great workshop to take pre-conception or earlier in pregnancy before taking a birth class. You can always find the info on either of our websites at eastriverdoulas.nyc or birthmattersnyc.com. On a more serious note, a brief content warning about today's story. Early pregnancy loss is mentioned briefly toward the beginning of this story. Now let's jump in and hear from Alexis. Hi, Alexis.
Hi, Lisa. I'm so happy to be here.
So glad to have you. Alexis took my birth class right before she had her baby. And I loved having you in class. We'll get to chatting about that a little bit later, but go ahead and introduce yourself.
So my name is Alexis Field. I live in New York City. I moved here in 2008 to be an actress, which is something that I have done and I'm still in the pursuit of doing and I love. And over that time, I've done every other job under the sun, like matchmaking and babysitting. I managed a baby and children's clothing boutique for 5 years. And now I teach baby music. So everything in my life surrounding my theatrical career has also led me down the vein of babies. And so now I am a mother, and that is my proudest job yet. I'm so grateful to be at this point in my life. And I'm so grateful to be talking to you. This is so cool.
Ditto. And how long ago did you give birth?
So Anita is just over 10 months old. So like about 10 months ago, she popped out of me and here we are. Her birthday is November 12th. So we're almost going to be celebrating her 1-year birthday. Mm-hmm. By the way, I'm sorry it took me so long to be doing this with you, but it's kind of cool to be coming at this from this sleep deprived, 10 months in perspective.
Oh, absolutely. And that's not late because you know what? I ran into one of my former clients yesterday when I was volunteering at CSA. And at the end of my volunteer shift, I hear Lisa. And I look over and it is someone who took my class almost 8 years ago.
Oh my God.
And we have been trying to schedule her podcast birth story sharing for 3 years.
Oh my gosh.
And she told me she's still interested. I finally was like, I'm going to lay off because maybe the moment has passed and she's not interested anymore. But she's like, no, I totally want to do it. So you're not late. 10 months is nothing.
Okay.
Some people are like 8 years later, I'm ready to share it. So I love it. And you have different perspectives at different points in time, right?
And it's something that you never forget too, because for me, it's the most transformational, miraculous experience of my entire life. Not to talk a big game here, but it was pretty life-changing. And so even 8 years down the road, I'm sure I'm going to be telling some version of this story to anyone who will listen.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. And we're recording this in September. I'm not sure when this will air, but just for listeners' understanding of the timeline.
Yeah.
So great. Welcome, welcome. And I'd love for you to share, maybe after you share your birth story, we can chat about your music classes a little bit more if you'd like to share more of that. So let's start off with sharing about your prenatal journey, or even if you wanted to share anything about the conception journey, you're welcome to do that. No pressure. What are the different ways that you prepared for the journey into parenthood? What was your pregnancy like? Anything, physically or emotionally to note?
So, like I said, I came to New York to be an actress, and it's something that I've dreamed of doing for a very long time. And it is my major dream. But I knew that if I came into this world and I wasn't a mother, then I would have really missed my calling. And so, it's an interesting thing to find myself here in this place because the dream is actualized. But to backtrack and get into like that, I met my husband in, January of 2016. I was in Florida advocating for my father. He was on life support. He's alive. He's doing well. He's living on the Upper West Side. Big fan of our baby. But it was a very rough time. And I happened to meet my husband down there in that time. And in 2019, he moved up here. And in 2021, we got married. And we both knew that we wanted to have a child together. I mean, when we were dating, I would see him with our friends' kids, and he was just so adorable. And I just knew that he was going to be a fabulous father. And so we got married in October, and we decided to start pretty early on to try and conceive. And we were very lucky. The first time that we attempted, we succeeded. But we ended up
time.
First time. It was very lucky. And I don't take that for granted because I know that the conception journey can be really, really fraught for people. And, it's interesting. We all have our trials and tribulations in life. And thankfully, that was something that really worked out for us right at the jump. That being said, about 6 weeks in, I ended up miscarrying. And I'm glad that I have the chance to talk about it here because it's something that most people don't have the opportunity to talk about. And it's not something everybody says it's not something that we talk about enough. But, it was difficult, but it was something that we worked through together and we mourned that loss. And I'm going to backtrack here. So we miscarried and I also got COVID at the exact same time. So it was like a double whammy. It was really, really tough. And so from my miscarriage COVID bed, I said, screw all this. Dan and I are going on a honeymoon, and we booked a trip to Costa Rica, and we had this fabulous, fabulous trip. But the very next time we could try to conceive, it worked out again. And 9 months later, we had our baby, and it was pretty incredible. So in this journey of wanting to be a mom and all this kind of stuff, a dear friend of mine is a doula and mother of three. And I would have all these late night conversations with her about childbirth. And she really set me up well to think about this whole journey as being a really positive, beautiful experience. And so I credit her with that. And I'm so grateful. But one of the things that she would say is it's the most natural thing that you could do with your body. And it's the only time in your life when you feel pain, but it's for a good reason. And she said to me, Alexis, I know you, and I know that you can do this naturally. You're going to be such a rock star in labor. And she planted those seeds when my husband and I were just dating. And so I really do believe that mindset is such a huge part of going into this experience. And I deep down knew that, like I could do this. That being said, I definitely had my moments of doubt. So she set us up well. When we found out that we were pregnant, I was so excited, and I got super nerdy about everything birth related and pregnancy related. I feel like when you're pregnant, you go through phases, or at least for me, I don't want to speak for everybody, but for me, I went through phases. And at the very beginning of my pregnancy, I was obsessed with being pregnant. I wanted to know everything about what I was feeling and what was happening to my body. And it was more of a me-centric kind of thing for a little while. And then as pregnancy progressed, I became more interested in the things that I needed to know at that time. At one point, it became the registry and all the gear that I had to get. At another point, it became this fascination with labor and delivery, which led me to you, which I'm so grateful for. And it led me to a lot of literature. I was I was listening on my AirPods to Ina Meg's book. I was listening to the natural, I believe it's called Natural Birth. It's this very generic title, but it's a fabulous book. I'll find it and we can put it in some show notes or something, but that was really great. And I remember in that book, they went through all the stages of labor. And that was something that was really, really fascinating to me. And I realized, like a script for a show, I can understand the process a little bit and understand what I can expect so that I can kind of go through the process with ease. And so I just devoured as much information as I could. I was taking yoga classes at the Prenatal Yoga Center. And what was awesome about that was not only were we stretching our bodies, which was feeling very good to my very pregnant body, but in each class, they were going through techniques for labor and helping prepare you and prepare your mind for labor. And so there were all these little nuggets and little experiences that I had that I felt led me down this path towards having this beautiful delivery. And I know that for a lot of people, it's not as easy. And I know that babies come out in all different ways, but they come out, and as long as they're healthy and happy, then that's really all that matters. But it was interesting because I set up my birth plan. I was working with Doula, which major shout out to Doula. If you're thinking about having a baby in New York City, I can't suggest them enough. They're just so wonderful. It's a practice that's all midwives, and they have an office in Brooklyn and in Tribeca. And you go in, and when I tell you, they see you as a person, not a patient. They spend as much time with you as they need. When I went for my 6-week postpartum visit, they let me nurse Anita in one of their rooms. And when I tell you, there was a line of people waiting. They were like, take the time that you need, which I felt awful about. But it's just to demonstrate any question that you have. And I am a person with a lot of questions. They took all the time with me. Anytime they did any kind of procedure, I mean, even so much as like putting the Doppler on my belly, they were asking for consent, which was huge.
And all too rare, right? That's called trauma-informed care that everybody should be receiving, and yet most of us don't. So I love hearing that that's the kind of care you received.
100%. And they made me feel so safe. They made me feel like everything was a discussion and that I was the one in the driver's seat, and these were choices that I got to make. That being said, the plan was that I would deliver at Mount Sinai West, which I was excited about. But I'm not super into hospitals. I'm not super into needles. If I could be delivering my baby in a bathtub in the forest with little angels like dancing around and like a string quartet, that would be my vibe. But my husband, God love him, he's a very safety conscious person, which makes for a nice balance in our relationship. But I think if we had our child in the forest or in a bathtub in our apartment or something like that, he would have lost his mind, which you will find out.
Or at least
did not
plan
happen.
to, if you had planned to.
If I'd planned to. In actuality, he did not lose his mind. And we are still happily married. In fact, even happier because she's brought us so much joy.
Can I ask you for more details about your yoga background? And can you talk a little bit about the value that it held for you going to specifically in this time of life and just anything you'd like to share along those lines?
Yeah, I would love to talk about yoga all day long in the same way that I would love to talk about birth all day long and theater all day long. So yoga came into my life when I was at Webster Conservatory, and it was part of the curriculum. And for the first time in my life, my body just felt so good. It felt so luxurious to be in these poses. And I found a deeper sense of self and a deeper connection to my breath and my being. And on a yoga mat, it's where I've found a lot of grounding and a lot of focus. I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was a kid. And I think a lot of people have a lot of voices and a lot of busyness that swirls around in their mind. And meditation practice has been something that I've had a loose relationship in my life, but yoga for me has always been kind of a mainstay where I could really find my inner self, kind of quiet the noise. And I don't know, for me, yoga is that one place where I'm not going to look around and see what anybody else is doing because I'm just tuning into what's going on inside of me. And that, led me to taking all different kinds of yoga throughout my 20s. And then in 2016, I felt a sense of sadness about the world. And I felt like I needed to do something to be a positive influence. And so I went to Kripalu and I got my yoga teacher certification, which I've done very little with, but I did go deeper into my practice and I learned more about how to make yoga truly accessible for everyone. And so when I was in my third trimester, I decided I'm going to invest in myself and I'm going to give myself the opportunity to go to classes at PYC. I also am a caregiver for my father. And I think a lot of women have this quality, but I like to take care of everybody else. And so yoga is one of those ways, especially if I'm in a class and I'm on that mat, I can turn off my phone, I can shut out the world, and I can just focus on me. And so that was awesome. And those things go very well for if you're going to be an actor, because it helps you really be in the moment. And they also are great for birth because it's about really being in the moment and being aware of the sensation and allowing the sensation, just like in a yoga class. And so getting to go to PYC and learning about the body and internal rotation and external rotation and doing wall sits and thinking about a wall sit as a contraction and all of that. It was wonderful. And I felt so supported. And yeah, Deb and everybody there, they're really awesome.
Absolutely. And if you haven't heard a different version of Alexis's birth story, you can tune in to Deb at Prenatal Yoga Center's podcast, Yoga Birth Babies. I'll link to it in the show notes. It's so fun.
100%.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that about yoga. I'm so glad I asked that because you shared some of the things that I also value on a personal level, as well as the reason that I spread the word to all of my birth class clients about please consider taking prenatal yoga because you're really connecting with your body. It is a moving meditation. And what you said on a personal level about just all the monkeys in our head, you didn't say it that way, but that's how I say it. I have so many monkeys in my head. And I have found that when I just try to sit still and do a guided meditation, I am quick to fall asleep. And in that way, I mean, yeah, I'm relaxed, great, but that's not really helping me in the same way that a moving meditation does, such as yoga. So really so powerful for life and for de-stressing and for taking good care of yourself and going inward and dropping into the body in preparation for birth, especially really wonderful. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course.
Are there any other things you wanted to share about your ways that you prepared for birth?
Well, I took your class and that was really, really awesome. And I'm so glad that I did. I was emailing you and I was hemming and hawing about when to take the class. And I felt like I was a little late to the party. And I was really worried about enrolling in this class because it's a 3-part class over weekends. And I was worried that the last weekend might be cutting it a little close to my birth, which I did. But you graciously allowed us to do the final class with a different group. So we started with the final class first, and then we did the final 2 classes. And the last class that we did was the same week that I gave birth to our baby, which was crazy. So thankfully we did it that way, which was awesome. And we got to be a part of 2 fabulous groups of people. And I don't know, for me, that whole experience was awesome because I was such a geek about all of this birth stuff that I got to go into your class and be like, oh, I know the answer. I know the answer. Or, oh, I think she's going to say this. And then you did say that. And then I got to ask super specific questions because I had already done kind of like the bigger picture work and you were there to really help guide me. And I remember when I left the second class, which was our last class, I thanked you because when I left, I felt like I had the confidence to really go into this experience, knowing that I was fully prepared. And for me, that's huge. As an actor, you want to know your lines backwards and forwards. You want to know your intentions. You want to know that piece that you're doing so well that when you go in, you can let all of the preparation go and just be in the moment and go on the ride. And for me, that's what I was able to do with you. And also, I had to do a lot of work on my own before going into class because I don't know about you or anybody else, but I get a little bit of learning anxiety in my older years. And so like when I'm learning something for the first time, I can get really overwhelmed and I can get anxious about getting all the things. And so being able to do my own work at home and then go in, I felt like I was relearning some things, but I was able to like really allow things to sink in a deeper way. And that was really, really helpful.
Yeah.
Really helpful.
I think you more than anyone else had really studied up and knew so much coming to class. And that is my ideal birth class student, especially in the intensive format, because that's a lot of learning condensed into a really short amount of time, long classes, 3 very long classes. I have a longer 6-class series to space it out for people who are able to schedule that. But either way, it's a lot. And so I love that you made the choice to, and just had such curiosity and fascination with all of it, that you had sought out other ways and other voices because it lands differently. Even if you're hearing the same thing, it is so helpful, like you're saying, for it to process on a deeper level, a more game-changing level, to hear it from different voices at different times in different ways, so, and I loved your super specific questions. And it just was such a joy to have you in class because of that. And I love on the other podcast how you talked about like the dance audition and how you just wanted to really know it back and forward. And you said a different, similar thing here in a different way, but yeah, it just
Can
makes
I
so
say
much
that again
sense
though? Because that is my thing.
Please
so
do,
okay, so like, so here's the thing, like, as an actor, you have to be a triple threat, right? You have to sing, you have to act, you have to dance. Well, Alexa moves, So if I go to a dance audition, I want to know the dance before I go in, because then I'll be able to relearn that dance in the audition when the stakes are a lot higher, and I'll have the confidence to really dance the thing fully and move through it. And so I feel like that's kind of what I did with Lisa's class. I learned that dance first. I did it on my own. And then I went in and really got to experience the thing fully.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. That just made my heart sing with my background in performing and musical theater and everything. I just was like, oh, that analogy. That's so perfect.
And also, if I never have to do another dance call again,
Same
that'd be
here,
fine.
my friend.
That'd be
Primarily
fine.
a singer, not an
Yes.
answer. I move.
Yes.
I love
Yes.
tap. I love tap. That's my favorite thing. But I'm not good at. Even though I took 9 years of dance of all kinds, I still am not a dancer.
Yeah. So many hours at a ballet bar. You know, my ballet teacher said to me, I said to him, I was like, you know, if I like really, really work on this forever and ever, super hard, do you think one day I could be in Fosse the musical? And he said, no. And that was the end of my dance journey.
Oh,
it's okay. He's a great guy. Sometimes you need a little truth in your life.
True. Very true. The other thing that's popping into my head in terms of the benefit of coming to birth class, I'm interested to hear your take on it, is a lot of people who come to my classes, for those who have an involved partner that they're bringing to class with them, a lot of people are like, well, I've done all the homework. I know a lot of these things, but my partner really doesn't. So any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. So I you know, I don't want to out my husband, but I gave him a couple of books and he might have thumbed through a couple of pages, but I don't think he read them cover to cover. I don't think he shared the same enthusiasm about what was going on with my body as much as I did.
Often the case for partners.
Mm-hmm. And so it was kind of like 3 last adorable dates together where we got to go over to Astoria, go and get really good food, and then really invest in the time together to prepare for this. And he did a really great job changing a diaper on a baby. And, you know, I definitely got pen on a baby and he did not. So that really instilled some confidence going into this experience. But yeah, it was just really nice to share that experience with him and also to do some of the comforting touch for birth stuff and the partner work and to really go over those things. I honestly don't think we could have gone over them too many times because it's different and your body is changing so much when you're pregnant. And so doing like a double hip squeeze at, 6 months is very different than doing it at 7 months is very different doing it when it's time. And so to be able to do that instilled more confidence in him and the fact that he knew like the different parts of labor and the fact that he kind of knew how to time contractions and all of that kind of stuff instilled confidence in me and him. It instilled confidence in him. And that was really helpful too. So it was really nice.
Nice. And then you hired a doula, right? Do you want to talk about like the timing in which and how you found your doula? And
so I was the worst. I was like the worst, Lisa, at hiring a doula because I knew who my doula was. It was my best friend, Barry, who lives in Florida, who has 3 children, who is like birth mother of the world. And, there was a lot of voices in my head saying, you'll know when you find the right doula. And oh my God, when you meet your doula, it's like finding your long lost sister. And oh my God, it's going to be so meant to be. And you'll just connect. And my thing is, I love people and I can connect with a brick wall. So I talked to a whole bunch of doulas and I was like, well, that one's great. That one's great. That one's great. That one's great. But who is my doula? Who's going to give just the right amount of touch? Who's going to, be forceful enough when it comes to helping Dan advocate for me and all of these things. And so I ran it down to the wire. I was at 38 weeks when we hired my doula, and I was at 38 weeks when I delivered Anita. Oh my God. But we ended up hiring Dina Gold. And in retrospect, I couldn't have made a better decision. She was phenomenal. And when I was looking for a doula, the reason why I wanted a doula was because I wanted someone who would help Dan advocate for me, especially with all the time that I've spent in hospitals advocating for my father. I've learned firsthand that just because a doctor is coming in and saying something does not mean that that is the only way that things have to go. And I knew enough about the cascade of interventions and experiences from friends of mine. It seemed like at that point that every friend of mine who had given birth, their birth kind of happened to them. And they didn't have a say really in how things went. And I didn't want that to be the case. I had a vision for my birth and I wanted to see it through. And so the idea of hiring a doula was really to give Dan a break, because I didn't know how long my labor was going to be. I didn't know what we were getting into. So to be there to support Dan by helping comfort me with physical touch, and then to also help him advocate and help us make the best decisions for me at the time. Because of course I wanted, no epidural. I wanted this whole thing to be as natural as possible, but I also wanted to prepare myself just in case things did not go that way. So Dina came onto the scene. We found her through Yiska Obadia, who has a comforting touch for birth class. That's really awesome. Dan and I couldn't go because that was the second time in our life that we had COVID. Yes, both times I had COVID, I was pregnant, not with the same child, but yes. But we did it virtually, which was awesome. And then I spent, a couple hours on the phone with Yiska, who is just a birth doulas goddess. And oh my God, she's so cool.
She's so great. Yeah.
She's so cool. So she had to be in Israel for my birth, so she can be around. But she's awesome.
Yeah. So you were saying you had one prenatal virtually with Dina?
Dina was amazing. So this is actually really important to talk about. One of the questions I was asking all of the doulas when I would meet with them was, how many births have you attended? And when I was talking to Yiska about this, she said, Alexis, I feel like I was just as strong at my first birth as I am now. And you really need to just think about who you connect with. And so Dina had attended 7 births at that point. And so because of that, she was very eager to make sure that she was doing the job to the best of her abilities. And so part of that was, before she even agreed to work with us, we did a virtual, which I would also say to people who are looking for a doula, yes, you can give yourself decision fatigue, but I learned so much from every doula that I spoke to. Holy moly. The only reason I signed up for a birth class was because I talked to a doula, and it was one of the doulas that we did not end up going with.
Mm-hmm.
So that was huge in my education and my journey.
Mm-hmm.
But Dina only wanted to work with us after meeting face to face. And so we went on a walk. She came and met us, and I got really good vibes. And still, I did not commit to her because I was just a space case and worried about making the right decision. But we met in person, and that was awesome. And Dina has a background in acupuncture and also in massage therapy. So that to me was a huge, huge asset. Also brass tacks. I'm a Jew. She's a Jew. There's a shared kind of cultural understanding.
Sure.
And also a similar kind of curiosity and a little bit of defiance in a way that just vibed with me and Dan. And she was incredibly, incredibly knowledgeable. For someone who'd only attended 7 births, she was just an encyclopedia of wisdom. And so she absolutely was a phenomenal choice for us. She is based in Sunnyside. And so we did, it's, 11 months at this point, but she definitely did an in-person, formal visit after we signed the contract with her. And it was on the Friday before I gave birth, but that's more part of the birth story. So I'll leave that for later.
Yeah.
Should we just roll on into it?
Absolutely. Go right on ahead.
So I always say the story of our birth really started the week before our birth, because I think one of the reasons why this baby came when they did was because I put the period on a bunch of sentences. A lot of things finished up. So like I said, we had our last class with you the weekend before. And then that Thursday, I had an 8-class card at PYC, and I finished my last class on the card because I didn't want to go wasting yoga classes. They do not grow on trees. And then Friday, it was Veterans Day or something like that of that week. And Dan had the day off from work. So we decided to make it let's gear up and finish everything for this baby. And so that day, Dina came over at 9 o'clock in the morning. And she met with me and Dan, and she helped go over more comforting touch for birth kind of stuff with him. And we went through my birth plan one final time and all of these things. And when she left, she was like, you're carrying kind of high. Don't think that you'll go in early. I'll probably see you after Thanksgiving. My due date was November 21st, and this was November 11th. And one of the other things that we went over with her was the protocol for when to call. Now, in all of my studying, I read a lot about early labor, and I did not want to be one of those people who went to the hospital too early. And I did not want to call my doula too early because I wanted her to be fresh and ready to help me when it was go time. And so, Dina said to us, she was like, I have a bypass on my phone. But if you think that you're experiencing some symptoms of labor and it's the middle of the night, maybe text, don't call. And I was like, I got it. I studied my birth stuff. I know what to do. I am not going to give you a call. I'm not going to alert you. I'm not going to wake you up in the middle of the night. So that was clear. So anyway, she leaves and I'm like, wow, another like 2-3 weeks of this. Wow, this is all right. Let's do it. I'm ready to be pregnant for a while longer. I loved being pregnant. My hair was gorgeous. I felt so beautiful in my body. Every time I put something on, I just felt like my best self. Anyway, she leaves and Dan and I decide to tackle putting together the nursery, which is just a crib in our bedroom because we live in a 1-bedroom, again, in a 5-story walk up in Harlem. And so we're putting together the crib and I'm cleaning like there's no tomorrow. I'm dusting out the corners. I'm doing all of these things. And of course I was like, oh my gosh, am I nesting? Hard to tell because I really cleaning and cleaning makes me feel good. But in retrospect, I was completely nesting. That night, we decided to go see a friend in a show down in Midtown. And in the show, there was a lot of screaming. Well, not screaming, but yelling, like a lot of very intense feelings. And the baby was moving around a lot. And I felt this feeling of, I have a short torso, and I felt this feeling of there's not enough room for us. And I was just very uncomfortable and shifting from side to side. And we saw my friend after the show and he was like, oh my God, you're so pregnant. Are you going to take a cab home? And I'll always remember this because I was like, no, I'm just pregnant. I'm just going to hop on the subway. I'm not going to have this baby for another few weeks. So, I'm fine. I got to power through. I'm a New York pregnant lady. So we started leaving to walk towards the subway. And I said to Dan, I've really loved being pregnant, but I can understand why some women towards the end of their pregnancy say, oh, get this baby out of me. Because I just don't feel comfortable anymore. So we head home and Dan was like, just so wonderful when I was pregnant. He's so wonderful now as a dad too. Like he was so nurturing and took such great care of me. And we're just like hanging out on our couch. Dan and I usually go to bed early, but this night we came home from the show and you can see like these cute little selfies of us from the couch and we're just enjoying our life. And it gets to be about 12:30 and we say, wow, we should really go to bed now. So we go to bed and I just can't get to sleep. And I'm feeling some cramping pain and some pain in my lower back, kind of like period pain. And I'm not feeling great. And it gets to be about 2:00 in the morning. I still can't get to sleep. So I decide to go to the bathroom. Maybe I'll just go to the bathroom. I'll feel a little bit better. I go to the bathroom, I wipe, and I see this light pink discharge, which I think, oh my gosh, well, that could be my bloody show, which means that I could be having the baby, but I'm not going to get excited because this would be very, very, very early labor and bloody show can happen like even a week ahead of the pregnancy and who even knows? So I say, but I'm going to do the responsible thing and I'm going to call Ula up. And the midwife on call that night was a woman named Nicole. And she said basically everything that I'd said. She said, get some rest. It sounds like you could be meeting your baby tomorrow and you'll want to rest up. So I go back to bed and I just can't go to sleep. I thought, oh my gosh, if I go into labor at night, I'm just going to go back to sleep. Oh, like women have a glass of wine. Like I thought, early labor was just going to be this adorable thing where Dan and I are like flipping pancakes and watching White Lotus on TV and like really like just like having a grand old time at home. And this was not the case. So I'm lying in bed and I'm having Dan push on my hips on the side. And I'm not okay. I have this moment of, this is early labor. Like I'm going to have to go through pain even worse than this for a very, very long time. Who was I kidding? How am I going to get through this without an epidural? Like I'm so weak. Who am I? So I end up going and sitting on the toilet, which I read in my books is something that people like to do when they're in labor. And I'm sitting on the toilet and it's making me feel a little bit better. And then I feel the urge to vomit and I'm sitting on the toilet, so I can't vomit in the toilet. So I vomit into the bathtub and I say, you know what, Dan, we should probably call Ula again if I'm vomiting. And so I call Ula and Nicole, the midwife, says, you should probably call your doula. And she says, let me stay on the phone with you and listen to a contraction. And she's, yeah, Alexis, it sounds like you're very much in active labor. You should call your doula. I was like, I'm not calling my doula. I said I wouldn't call my doula. It's too early. What if we need her like at 4 a.m. tomorrow night? I can't do it. And she says, Alexis, you're contemplating going to the hospital. It sounds like you're definitely experiencing some very strong sensations. I would call your doula. So I say, Dan, call the doula. And he calls the doula and she does not pick up. The bypass on her phone works, but she does not pick up. And at this moment, I am really in the throes of active labor reaching transition, like already. And so I say to Dan, clean out the vomit in the tub. I am getting in, draw me a hot bath. I haven't had a hot bath for 9 months. I'm going to have a hot bath, do or die. And I'm getting in the tub. And our tub is actually really nice for living in the 5-story brownstone in Harlem. There's actually jacuzzi jets in the tub, which was really, really nice. I get in the tub and I am just making long, elongated sounds at this point. I am just using sound to kind of guide me through. Here I thought, when I was in class and everything, I'm going to be making horse breaths. For people who don't know what horse breaths sound like, they're like this. Because that was my move in yoga.
Oh, that was so weird. I couldn't even hear it though. That was strange. It filters it out.
Oh my gosh.
Let me see if I can do it. Do you hear that?
No, I heard like a little. Oh my goodness! I'll have to.
We need less fancy mics.
Oh my gosh! Gosh darn it! I'm throwing this mic out.
Imagine fluttering lips. The air is going through the lips.
Yeah, you kind of sound like a horse. And it kind of sounds like a cross between a raspberry and just breathing. So I thought, oh yeah, like when I'm in labor, I'm going to be, like horse breathing all over the place and it's going to be so great. And no, like what I needed was to just make a long, elongated sound on a note. And not even necessarily a low note. I just needed a note. And that became my vision. That was my mantra of sorts. That was what I could focus on instead of the sensation. And that kept me back, kept my face and my throat open throat, open vagina, as they like to say. And here I am in the bathtub and things are ramping up and Dan is starting to time contractions, and contractions are crazy. I think he said that there were like 16 in the course of an hour and they were all over the place. And this was just what I thought labor was. I thought, wow, this just must be active labor. And so I'm in the tub. I'm like starting to have these contractions very quickly. Dan goes from timing contractions to just running around in his underwear around our apartment. And I was like, what are you doing? You're not even timing my contractions anymore. He was packing his hospital bag. So if your husband hasn't packed the hospital bag at 36 weeks, do it.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Listen to Alexis.
Yes. And honestly, like next time, I think at 30 weeks, we're going to have all of this stuff on lockdown. But anyway, so Dan's running around, underwear, just very frantic. I'm like, another one started and he's nowhere to be found. And I'm like, okay, I guess I'm birthing this baby by myself in my bathtub.
Oh
And
no.
so then I start getting really hot, which I heard that like when you're going through transition and stuff like that, you could be having hot flashes and things like that. I thought it was because of the bathwater. And in my head, I was like, oh my God, I'm so hot. If I go to the hospital and they take my temperature, they're going to think that I'm running a fever. They're going to give me an epidural. They're going to do all these interventions. So I say, quick, Dan, get me some ice. And so he runs to the freezer. He brings me a bag of peas. I put the bag of peas on my head. He brings me a water bottle, which like we never put like water in water bottles and freeze them anymore. I used to do that in my 20s, but I don't know. Somebody did that. And thankfully that was there. And I have the bag of peas on my head. I'm in the hot water bubbling. And I've got this ice water bottle in my hand. And as the contractions are getting more and more intense, I'm just focusing on this ice on my hand because in Lisa's class, we did the ice challenge where we hold on to the ice cube. And I thought, what if I just think about my hand against this ice instead of these contractions right now? Mm-hmm. And that really worked. I know that was just to prepare you for contractions, but actually in the contractions, I could focus on my hand against this bottle. It was really about what can I focus on as that wave comes up.
That brain distraction. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That's a first. I don't think I've ever had anybody say that they tried the ice exercise in labor.
I mean, it was like all distractions on deck was really the name of the game at that point, because at that point I was full on in transition. And so I say to Dan at this point, I'm like, Dan, call the doula again. Tell her I am in active labor, which is a new level of labor. It's active labor. And he gets through to her finally. And oh my God, lickety split. She lives in Sunnyside. She was at our apartment within 30 minutes. She gets up the stairs. I think Dan met her in his underwear again. No time for pants. They come upstairs. And while he's going to get her, I remember feeling this feeling of, oh my God, I think I could poop. And I thought, oh my God, I feel like pooping. That's a stage of labor. This is very good. And I thought to myself, wow, Alexis, you've been constipated for 4 days now. The worst thing that could happen is you could finally poop and feel a little bit better, but it's probably not poop. It's probably a baby. And so I haven't mentioned it yet, but a lot of the sensations I was feeling, I was having back labor, like low back pain, which I remember in class, you said that you had back labor too. Very not pleasant, but this whole thing was doable. Here I am going through transition by myself in a bathtub, and I'm okay. I'm really okay. I'm doing it. So anyway,
and hydrotherapy makes a huge difference, right? And all the different coping things you were doing, but the hydrotherapy can be so powerful.
All the different things. And also, this reminds me, remember in class when you were on the ball and you said that at a certain point in between contractions, you're no longer really clear-headed and rhythm becomes really big. Mm-hmm. So in between contractions, I'm still making sound and it's in rhythm, and I can't really focus on other people at that point in time. And so I feel that urge to poop, and I lift up my left leg and I hook my arm underneath my knee like I'm in like a sideways happy baby pose. And I just allow myself to push a little bit, and some fluid goes into the bathtub. This fluid becomes a theme because my husband gets really freaked out by this fluid because safety first. So he comes upstairs with the doula. The doula, being as kind and wonderful as possible, says to me in her very calming voice, Alexis, we need to get you out of this bathtub, and we need to get you down these 5 flights of stairs, and we need to go to the hospital now. And I was like, no, I am not going to the hospital. I'm not getting out of this tub. This baby is here. I am having this baby right now. And she says, I know you think that you're in, the pushing phase. I know that you think you're really far along, but I promise you need to get up and we have time. We have time to get to the hospital. I'm like, no, we don't. And then the next contraction comes and I let out this blood-curdling scream. And she turns to Dan and she says, Dan, call 911. because a doula is not allowed to deliver a baby.
Right.
So
We're
we
not a
have to
clinical
have,
provider. Yeah. That's why she's, no, we need to go to the hospital because I'm not a clinical provider. Even if she did realize that you were like pushing.
yeah. But
Mhm.
at that point, no way was I going to get down 5 flights of stairs. No way was I going to get all the way from Harlem, Upper Manhattan, all the way down to 59th Street. But in that moment, by saying that, she said, I believe you. And that gave me the safety to continue in this beautiful birthing process with the peas on my head. So that happens. And Dan's, I don't like this water. This looks really disgusting. I don't think this is safe. And she says to me, Alexis, I believe you that you can't get to the hospital, but I promise you, you do not want to deliver your baby in this bathwater right now. And with that, I feel like I was through transition at that point because I felt clear headed. I had a break between the contractions. She hoisted me up and we got out of the tub, and right outside the hallway, right over there, I can see it right now, there was a $20 IKEA rug. And I thought, you know what? Our friend's dog loves to pee on this rug. If it's good enough for Ollie, it's good enough for me. We're going to birth the baby right there. And I went straight to all fours. All fours because that was the position that I read about. That seemed the most natural to me. And I was on all floors and I kept yelling at her, back, 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 so that she would push the heel of her hand into my back to provide some comfort. And I'm on all fours. And then all of a sudden, the first ambulance arrives. And I say to Dan, please go down, let them in, and then run back up. Because there was one other time that we had some first responders come to our building. And, you know, it's 5 stories and they're not used to it. And I wanted my husband back and by my side as quickly as possible. So he did put pants on. He went downstairs, he brought them up, and they came up. And it seemed like maybe they were inexperienced with birthing because one of the paramedics was really nervous and she kept going to our front window and kept saying, is the other ambulance here? Is the other ambulance here? And at this point, I'm on all fours. I am fully in the pushing mode, and I take my knees and I go from having them parallel to an internal rotation so my hips can be wide. I am like starting to feel a head, and I'm like yelling out, ring of fire, it's happening, it's happening. And this other ambulance gets here and things are progressing. And at some point, Dan gets Nicole on FaceTime and she's having the camera move over to my back and she's seeing what's going on. She said, there's no way you're getting to the hospital. Let's just keep progressing. And so I'm progressing. And then this woman who's the paramedic who's in charge, she is trying to get me to go to the hospital. And she's saying, Alexis, do I have your consent to go to the hospital? And I'm thinking, I forgot a part. I forgot a very important part. The first paramedics who show up, the first thing they tell me to do when they get into my house is they tell me to get on my back. And this is where my doula was worth every single penny, because she said she is not getting on her back. You are not telling her to get on her back in her own house. Absolutely not. And I was like, yes, Dita, we're doing this. Cut to ring of fire is happening. Everything's moving along. This other paramedic is, do I have your consent to go to the hospital? And I'm thinking, I'm delivering my baby right now. Stop arguing. And then she goes to the doula. Do I have your consent to bring her to the hospital? And my doula's, I can't speak for her. It's her body, you know? And then she says to Dan, and Dan says, she said no. And I'm like, they're all arguing. And I just want to deliver the baby. I just want to have a good time. And so anyway, she gets high and mighty and she says to everybody, I'm sorry, but has anyone else here ever delivered a baby? And Nicole on FaceTime says, actually, I've delivered over 500 and she's not going to the hospital. She's having the baby now.
Yes.
Which was like another win. And so in that moment, everyone settles and I start feeling the head come out. And I'd studied this natural expulsion process. And I also really, really focused on the pushing process in the last couple of weeks. And I learned that, the most important thing to do is to allow the head to come down, and then the head will come back up for a little bit. And then the next time the head will come down and it'll come back up. And so this was happening. Rebounding. That's what it's called.
Yeah.
So
very important for baby and for you.
So important, and something that I was very much okay with and at peace with as it was happening. And I was excited as I was feeling this head come out and then go back up. And the next time it came out a little further. And with each contraction, the paramedic who was in charge got more and more concerned and more worried. And she started saying, "No, I got to take you to the hospital. Alexis, do I have your consent? This is not okay. We got to get her to the hospital now." And in that moment, I knew that the only thing that I could do was push with all my might to get that baby out, because there was going to be no end to this. And so on the next,
you felt that strife.
I did. My vagina hates it too.
Yeah.
But on the next contraction, I just bared down and pushed as hard as I could. And I pushed past the contraction, and then out in the blink of an eye was this slobbery mess. And then this paramedic said to me, "Do you want to hold her?" And I was like, her, because we didn't know she was a girl. And she was here. And it was incredible. And nothing else mattered in that moment, because she was here and she was safe, and she just was pink and gorgeous. And then because I wasn't in the hospital, because I didn't have to make all of these consents already, and because I denied, doing everything else, I was able to deny cord clamping, and I could let her, hold on to that cord until it went white. And for weeks after she was born, everybody was like, "Oh my God, her coloring is so great. Did you delay cord clamping?" And yeah, we did. And it was just wild. She was very slippery. And then when we were ready to cut the cord, it was wonderful. I had this moment of, okay, I'm ready to cut the cord now. It's how every birth should be, I feel like. But the paramedic went to Dan and said, "I want Dan to cut the cord though." And the paramedic said, "Do you have anything to cut the cord with?" And Dan was like, "Do you have anything sterile?" And then he pulled out a scalpel. But it was wild. And then they had to get me down 5 flights of stairs to go to the hospital to get stitched up. And that was an adventure. 2 women paramedics carried me down the stairs. Go women. It was very painful because it was a metal seat. And we used the crib mattress that came with the crib so that it could be like a little bit comfier, but it was awful. And then contractions started happening for the placenta. I delivered the placenta in the emergency vehicle, which was so cool. Tour the placenta. If you are giving birth, I didn't know about this. I was kind of grossed out by placenta until I saw my own. But it was the most beautiful thing that I've ever seen. It was like a tree of life. It was gorgeous. I don't feel the need to like make art out of it or save any of it or eat any of it. That's not my bag. I know other people like that. But looking at it and seeing this gorgeous tree of life and seeing this thing that sustained my child for this whole time, that was wild and wonderful.
Beautiful.
So yeah.
Wow. So anything you want to share about your postpartum experience at the hospital?
Well,
okay if you don't.
Well, actually, I would love to share what happened after the baby was out with the paramedic, because this is really there are no villains in this story, right? In the minute that this baby came out, her name is Anita. The paramedic who was in charge, who was giving us so much resistance, she instantly was like this big proponent of skin to skin and all these natural, more evolved ways of thinking. She was just like pushing very, very harshly, but she was very into it. She was like, "Get that baby skin to skin. It's very important. It's very important." And then we got in the ambulance and she was talking to Dan, and it turned out that she had a home birth for herself that she ended up having to transfer to a hospital, and that it didn't go well. So she had some birth trauma too. And so these times in life when you think that someone is just being a jerk, a lot of times there's just something underlying, that they have a history or a trauma that we just don't know about, and you got to cut them some slack. And so I was glad to have her there. I'm glad that she was able to witness the birth of the most amazing baby on the planet. And I'm glad that we had that kind of full circle kind of moment with her, because it makes sense. So yeah. And then at the hospital, I met my midwife. It was pretty wild to be rolled into the hospital with a baby. I remember like waving to the staff as we were going by, being like, "Yep, brought her in with me. BYOB."
Love that.
So yeah, and then she was perfectly healthy. Thank goodness. And they stitched me up. Breastfeeding was not something that I thought would be difficult. I did my research about it beforehand, but it's like riding a bike. You just got to do it. And that postpartum wise was a journey, and it didn't go the way that I'd hoped it would. Excuse me. And that kind of started in the hospital, right? Because you have the changing of staff. So there were some licensed lactation consultants who were phenomenal, and there were some that were not. And I had one for a couple days who was not, and it was not the best start to our journey. But it is what it is. But one thing that was wild was the people from Doula would also come in to check on me, and it was such a different experience. Some people at the hospital were phenomenal, but a lot of the doctors were very busy, and it just was a very different experience. And someone from Doula would come in the room, and they would actually sit there and talk with me and hang out and answer all of my questions, made sure that I felt comfortable, made sure that I understood what was going on. And they were there to field any of my concerns postpartum. And so that was really, really wonderful. And I was so glad that I felt like I had this extra team of my own people to really look after me postpartum, because it's interesting. You have the baby and there's this huge flash of like emotions and joy and all these happy chemicals and dopamine and all the things. And then there's this drop, and you're left with a body that's very different than what you knew before. And I just, every time I fed her after she was born, I would start to have contractions again. I would get the chills. Dan would stay with me in bed and just hold me when I would feed her to kind of help me get through that. And so it was a wild experience, but we brought her home, and she was little at the time. She was 6 pounds, and then she lost 10% of her weight, which we put her on supplements. And now I haven't weighed her, but that kid is a lot to bring up these stairs now. And she is very giggly and very happy. And she earned her first paycheck yesterday modeling. So, things are getting on like gangbusters.
Wonderful.
So,
Oh, this is so exciting. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. Are there any final reflections in these months that you've been a parent now and you've had a little more chance to process the way things went and played out? Just any final reflections on that, and or tips or like insights, nuggets of wisdom for people who might be expecting their first or subsequent babies?
Yeah. Anybody who's pregnant now, when I offer my unsolicited advice, which pregnant ladies love, I loved it. But if you're open to advice and you're listening, what I would say is this is the one time in your life where pain isn't something to be afraid of. And you don't even have to think about it as pain. You can think of it as a sensation, but every time you feel the sensation, you are getting closer and closer to meeting the most precious, beautiful gift of your life. And I don't even know if I would have said precious, beautiful gift a couple months ago. I love my daughter, but every single day I am even more in awe of the fact that I get to be her mom and that I have this beautiful, beautiful human in my life. And it's wild. You're pregnant and you have this baby, and even when you want it, like I wanted it, you have these ideas of how it's going to be. And in some ways it's harder, but in my experience, it's harder, but it's also even more amazing than I could have ever imagined. So if you're feeling a little fearful about your birth, try to turn that fear into excitement, because they're just different sides of the same coin, and allow that fear to be there. Don't try to push it away, but just say, hey, fear, you can sit in the back seat and I'll be in the driver's seat.
Ooh,
and
love that.
Make sure that you have your team of people ready to corral around you and help you. That's Deb's advice. She said you have to have your wagon wheel, which I think is also really good.
I love it. Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Yeah, that mindset is so much of it. As much as we can process through and put in the back seat. I just really love that visual. The fear and anxiety, that's removing, it's allowing that oxytocin to flow, and it's allowing things to go, in your case, really efficiently.
Really fast. Oh yeah, I didn't even say. So 2 a.m. bloody show, 5 a.m. on the dot, the picture of her popping out of me. So 3 hours in total.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa. For
Yeah.
your first too.
Yeah. They say the second one's going to be even faster. So Dan said that we can have an at-home water birth next time. So thank you, Anita.
You don't have to just plan a hospital birth. Act like you're going to do that and then show him.
Yep.
Yay. I'm really happy to hear that development. That's great. It's good to plan it if you can. If you're going to give birth at home, better to not have to call the paramedics and have that whole like strife, potential strife.
Yeah. Better to have one of those nice inflatable pools, you know, have everything ready.
Absolutely. Nice. Well, keep me posted on that if that happens.
Absolutely. We shall see. We got to make another baby first, and I still need a little bit more time to heal up and, you know, figure out where we're going to live, because 1 bedroom with a baby it's getting a little tight over here, especially now that she's crawling and climbing on everything. So,
right. Yes. Yeah. And we had around 3 years spacing, and I had heard that was a really good spacing in terms of the closeness of the siblings. And we have found that to be very true. So for your consideration, not that we can always plan it. Ours ended up being a little under 3 years, just barely, because we got pregnant the second time faster than we expected. But
the whole idea of a second one, it seems so crazy to me. Like, we both want one, but also at the same time, it's like, how do we do with both? Oh my goodness. How do we even do laundry or brush our teeth? It's like,
right. Yeah.
But I mean, my feeling is that if they bring even half the amount of joy that Anita brought into our life, it's going to be so well worth it. So.
Absolutely. And really, really cool to see them interacting eventually once the second one isn't an infant, right?
I know. I know. I'm going to be very emotional, full on basket case seeing that for sure.
Well, did you want to talk at all about your classes and share a little bit about that in case that's still available when this airs and people are interested?
Totally. So I'm mostly a stay-at-home mom these days, but it's very nice to get out of the house, and I love singing. And so I have a ukulele, and I have a whole bunch of toys and all these different props and things. And I do baby music classes around the city. Right now I'm doing a music class at the Children's Museum in Manhattan, which is so cool because it's in the actual exhibit. So music is kind of a smaller part of the class, because we also get to explore. It's almost like Sleep No More, but for babies, is like how I like to describe it, because it's this immersive music class. And then I'm also starting up classes at the Prenatal Yoga Center, which I'm so excited about. And that's going to be more music focused. And that's going to be in this beautiful, beautiful space with this beautiful community of people. And so that is going to start up probably before this airs, but that's going to be so much fun.
Yeah. Great. Well, maybe I'll get from you whatever links or whatever. And hopefully if you continue to do more rounds, subsequent rounds, then hopefully that web link will be the same, or I can update it or whatever. But I love that. Well, that was one of my favorite things. I don't know if you've ever heard of Music for Aardvarks. I don't even know if it still exists anymore.
No, but I love the name.
Yeah, we loved it. It was really smart, urban centric lyrics for like city kids. City babies, city toddlers.
Very cool.
And
oh my gosh.
with guitar, we loved it so much. And they have like recordings and things of all their songs. And so we found ourselves always singing those as the kids were little, and really fun. So such a great way to bond with your baby and connect with other families who have a passion for music maybe, and love for music. And so I love that you're doing that. I want to definitely spread the word, and I hope that it continues beyond Anita just being itty bitty and it be, her being part of the class. That's really always exciting.
Yeah. Well, we shall see. Time will tell, but that little girl is starting to do her little velociraptor cry, which tells me that she just woke up, which is kind of perfect timing, right?
Perfect timing. Yes. Velociraptor.
Yeah. She's a little dinosaur. Yeah. Dan, you go get her and I'll finish up with Lisa. I mean, if anybody needs any encouragement, they just need to go and sit down in your living room, right? Like, they're there and they're going to know that they're in the right place, and nobody is going to go into your class and not feel like they made the right decision, right? And not feel more prepared.
You're sweet. Well,
It's important.
Appreciate you saying that. Yeah.
No, you put a lot of time and a lot of energy into what you do, and you care so much, and you're so specific about the things, and you give people a lot of information, but you don't overload them with too much information. You make it attainable, right? And you explain things in different ways. And, it is such a great investment for people. And I don't know, it was wonderful for us. I had a baby. I hope you're still recording. I do want people to hear this.
I am.
Lisa, I had a baby in my apartment in 3 hours, and I could do it because I took your class.
Well, you, mama.
Yes.
You get all the credit.
But could you imagine like somebody who did not understand the way that birth works being basically alone, but because of what I learned, I understood what my body was going through, and I was able to help myself cope with it and be okay with it so that it could be successful.
Yeah. Yeah. You're absolutely right. I mean, in my personal experience too, it's why I became a doula and a childbirth educator, was I saw the difference that the education, the preparation, the yoga, the doula support, all of those things it's a game changer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. No, there's something like transition could be a very scary thing if you don't know that it's happening. I had this moment when I was giving birth, and I didn't say it when I was telling the story, but like I had this moment where I was like, oh no, not another contraction. I can't do this anymore. And I was like, oh, that must be transition.
Because we learned that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was like, okay, that means that I'm like getting to the finish line. Yeah. That was very important for me to know.
Thank you, Alexis, for taking the time. It's so wonderful to reconnect with you. And
it's so good to reconnect too.
All right. So that's Alexis's story that I have really been looking forward to sharing with you for a while now. So in today's commentary, I will briefly touch on the term cascade of interventions, open throat, open vagina, the ice challenge, and rebounding. Oh, and getting pen on a baby. Got to explain that one too. In case you're not familiar with the term cascade of interventions, this refers to the extremely common occurrence in hospital births of one intervention leading to a whole sequence of interventions. It's highlighted in the documentary The Business of Being Born. The American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, or what we call ACOG, our main ruling authority over our maternal healthcare system, has stated that a major reason we are ranking at the bottom of the developed nations in our outcomes for birthing people is that we are intervening too much. Yet, despite the fact that they're encouraging obstetricians to stop over-medicalizing birth and intervening all the time, it's really what OBs are generally trained to do, and most of us get stuck in our ways. So, educating yourself on strategies to avoid the cascade of interventions can lead to a safer, healthier, more satisfying birth. The biggest specific strategies here will be being very strategic in picking an aligned setting and provider, meaning OB or midwife, being strategic with assembling the rest of your personal birth support team, educating yourself, laboring at home for most of labor, or in Alexis's case, all, and asking for more time when non-emergency interventions are being recommended. Alexis said a mantra of hers during labor was open throat, open vagina. Just in case that was a new and perhaps odd concept for you to hear, I wanted to explain this. There's a biologically known connection between our throat and mouth region and our pelvic floor muscles, the hammock of muscles inside the pelvis. What I mean by this is if we, in our response to the climbing intensity of labor, clench our jaw, which is a very understandable response, this tends to bring about tension in the pelvic floor as well. This is the opposite of what needs to happen in order for baby to come down and through that set of muscles. This is one of many strategies for labor that we go over in birth class, mindfully letting the mouth and jaw stay relaxed as much as possible and using breath work or vocalization to help maintain that looseness, like Alexis talked about. The ice challenge that Alexis mentioned, using as a comfort measure for her own labor, is something I use in birth class from an oldie but goodie birth book called Birthing from Within. I also talked about it back in season 2. In it, we do 3 rounds of 1-minute mock contractions in which we hold a piece of ice on the inside of our wrist, doing different things in each round for coping with the cold sensation. This is a very useful way for many people to bring to our conscious awareness some of our instinctive pain coping tools that are so instinctive that we often don't have conscious awareness of them. Bringing conscious awareness to these things can be a really powerful way of noticing tools that could be really useful in the birthing process. I wanted to explain the term rebounding that Alexis brought up. This is one of many things that I like to reframe for pregnant folks to help it be perceived in a more positive way instead of negative or frustrating. In the pushing stage, it's really common, helpful, and necessary for each contraction to squeeze the baby down, and then in the breaks, baby slides back up a little bit. This can be super frustrating for someone who's been pushing for a while or is really exhausted and just wants to meet their baby. However, it's really biologically important and protective for both the baby and the birth giver. I'll explain a few of those vantage points. Throughout the whole pregnancy, baby is breathing through the umbilical cord, meaning they're getting all of the oxygen through the blood that comes to them through the cord. This means that their lungs need some preparation for breathing outside the uterus. This back and forth rebounding process squeezes their lungs during the contraction and releases the lungs in the breaks in between. This gets the baby's lungs ready for the inhale-exhale motion that will be required of them as soon as they're born. There's also amniotic fluid blocking the airways of the baby throughout the pregnancy that needs to be cleared so that they physically can take their first breaths with their lungs. This back and forth squeezing and releasing is allowing time for the vast majority of fluid to be squeezed out of their lungs, making this physically possible. And here's where I would say, careful what you wish for. A lot of people say they hope for their labor to be quick. Now, I'm all for an efficient labor, but not necessarily an overly fast pushing stage specifically. If the baby misses too much of this rebounding, we will see a big increase in breathing challenges when the baby is born, and a greater likelihood of needing to do deep suctioning to express out the fluid that didn't have time to naturally get squeezed out. This is a major difference between a vaginal birth and a belly birth or C-section, because most babies in a C-section miss this rebounding process that's so valuable. This is why in a cesarean, we're more likely to see breathing challenges right at the time of birth. It's also why they need standardly and immediately to cut the cord and take the baby across the operating room to do deep suctioning to help remove what wasn't naturally squeezed out. Another important benefit of rebounding is allowing time for the baby's moldable head to shape to the birth giver's body and gradually stretch the vaginal tissue open. This bodes well for protecting the pelvic floor and minimizing or avoiding tearing. This is another point at which I'd say careful what you wish for if you say you'd hope for a fast birth. When Alexis mentioned having gotten pen on a baby, I just wanted to make a quick clarification on this to explain. The last portion of my birth class series includes newborn care and feeding prep with some tactile practice. In this section, I recommend that expectant parents hold their baby doll throughout the class, even when we're not practicing things like diapering, burping, bathing, soothing, etc. This is because the fact that some of my birth class baby dolls have pen marks and food stains on them drives home the fact that we could definitely use some practice holding a baby while trying to write, eat, or drink. Since it's been a few months since we recorded this, I checked in with Alexis to see what her current teaching schedule is like. As of the time we're airing this, Alexis is currently teaching her museum hybrid music class at Children's Museum of Manhattan. She recommends reaching out to her on Instagram for details. Her Instagram handle is Lex in the City 1. That's LEX in the city and then the number 1. And as always, that will be in the show notes as well. Okay, here's a sneak peek of what's up next time.
What I learned was when he came out, he didn't really belong to me. I was just his steward. I'm just here to provide everything that I can for him in terms of resilience and love and affirmation. And he'll find his way. Like Khalil Gibran says, your children are not your own. I learned that up close and personal when we had our first child.
This week, I encourage you to take a few moments each day to take a few deep breaths and visualize holding your baby in your arms. Connect with your baby in whatever way feels aligned for you. It could be telling your baby that you love them. It could be sharing with them about your day. It could be just sitting in stillness, listening for what your baby might want to communicate to you in body or in spirit. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to the Birth Matters podcast today. If you enjoy this show, would you please be sure you are subscribed or following us wherever you listen to this? And that will help be sure that you don't miss out on any new episodes because we have lots more goodness coming up for you soon. So we'll see you next time. Be well.